Hello, everyone. Jak Syn here on behalf of Fiend.com and Future Daze, and today we're sitting with John Kunkel of the New Division. How are you doing today, John?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here, and it's so good to hear that you're doing great. I know with everything going on right now, it's kind of hard some days to feel in that super peppy mood, but it's good to see that you're doing well.
Yeah, everything's going really well over here, fortunately for me, and I'm really fortunate to be able to do music full time. So not everyone has that luxury, I guess, but it's a really good time for me right now. I'm working a lot with a lot of new projects, new songs, and new material. So I think the fans are going to appreciate this time, hopefully, once everything's over.
So that's so great to hear that you are working, full time on the music and putting out all that great content. And I'm sure that it's going to be amazing once it all gets released into the world. So today we're going to ask you a couple of questions and see where it goes from here. You ready to do this?
Let's do it.
What are three of your most memorable moments performing live?
There was one of the first shows that we ever did, which was in Riverside, California, back in 2008 or 9, I think it was. And this was a really unique show because we were playing with 3 other promotional groups or whatever you call it. So there was our guy, and we were playing on the very top of this place called Back to the Grind, which was a coffee shop, and they had like these 3 different layers, like 3 different little mini venues inside of the coffee shop, which is actually a really big coffee shop now that I think about it. And we were on the middle section, but above us there was another show going on, which was like a punk show. I forget what exactly it was. And then at the very bottom there was like a basement area, and they were playing like hip hop and rap. And so halfway into our set, we took a little break, and I started to look outside of the window, because there was a window that was facing the parking lot from the area that we were playing in. And we just see this giant fight breaking out. And there's like, these punk guys going after these hip hop guys, and they're kicking people and they're throwing rocks. And there was this group of girls that grabbed another girl and started dragging her, and they were kicking her on the floor. And there was probably about 50 or 60 people outside. And I was just like, how in the world did this ever happen? We're in the middle of our set. You're at like this most ecstatic point of, we're getting through our set and we're having a great time. And then you look out this window and you just see all these people fighting. And so we stopped our set and we went down to see what was going on. And it was somehow a fight broke out. And I wouldn't say that was a memorable show in the sense that it was like a good memory. It was just a crazy incident that had happened, and I'll never forget that show because it was a really good show for us, but we had to cut our set short. And then all these people were getting injured and hurt and fighting outside, and the cops came up and all these people started running and spreading out. So that was a really crazy memory. The second memory I was going to share was opening for Peter Hook, who was formerly the bass player for New Order and Joy Division, as some of you know. And that was a really great memory because we got to open for him in Mexico City at this really cool venue that actually kind of reminded me a lot of the Hacienda, which was the iconic venue in Manchester that kind of started the rave movement, started a lot of the house and partying kind of movement. And he was, and still is, one of my icons, in terms of what I value in music. And having that opportunity to go and play with him was incredible. And then the third one was when we played at the Rough Trade in Brooklyn, New York. And the reason that show was so memorable was because it was one of the last shows of this 2-week tour that we were doing across the United States, where we started off in Texas, drove all the way down to Florida, went up to New York. And we were all pretty worn out by that point, and we're kind of lightweights when it comes to touring. Like, we don't really tour very well for a long period of time. And so that show was really rewarding because we'd had a couple of shows where in between cities, we just didn't really feel like there was a lot of good connection with the audience, and there was technical issues, and we were pretty burnt out. But that show was really amazing because at the end of the set, which I didn't expect this would happen, but at the end of the set, all these people came up onto the stage because I had invited them to, kind of similar to what you've done before with your sets. That's always like a really fun thing to do. It kind of bring the crowd on the stage, and you really get to have everyone dancing with you and stuff like that. And so during the very last song, which we played, was this song called Memento, which is like an 8-minute long song. during the dance party. Everyone came on stage, and it was just crazy. It was like a surreal moment, and you just have like this euphoric kind of energy that I think that's what everyone kind of strives for when they try to play a live show. Is you're trying to get to that feeling, that moment of like euphoria. And when we played that show and that happened, that was like the ultimate. Okay, this is probably one of my favorite shows that we've ever done in the last 10 years. You know, it was just incredible. So those are my three memories right there.
That's some pretty impressive memories. I mean, you know, from a massive fight to Pete Hook to an amazing like dance party session with everybody. The last one you're talking about with the dance party, bringing everybody up and having that moment where you're all together, it really is that euphoric feeling where you really feel like at that moment in time you are very, very connected with everybody and everything that's going on. It's definitely a very special moment that you will remember for the rest of your life. I'll tell you that.
It's crazy for sure, because that was also the first time that we had played New York ever. So there had been fans who were like, you know, we've been waiting for you for 5 or 6 years to come out and play. And so there was a lot of, you know, built up energy from everyone to have a good time that night.
And you know what? Even your memory with Pete Hook, I mean, that is amazing. Like being able to be there with him, I'm sure was just, it was that once in a lifetime kind of thing where you just kind of got like, whoa, I can't believe this. I am a big fan of New Order. And I gotta say that is definitely a very top memory that you have there. So thank you for sharing that with us. What would you say is your favorite album / EP that you've worked on?
I think that the favorite album that I ever did was probably the first full-length album, which was Shadows. And the reason I say that is because back then I was working basically part-time. I didn't really have I had a lot of time on my hands. And this was also at a period of time where I didn't have a lot of music released. And so I felt like I was just fresh with inspiration. I didn't have any kind of, what's the word? You know, we didn't have like critics or reviews and stuff like that at that point. So you really kind of were going into it, or I was going into it with very little inhibition in terms of I can kind of do whatever I want. And I didn't have any worries when I was writing. I wasn't thinking about, oh, are people going to like these songs? Are people going to think that this is a good record? Or are people going to think that I could have done better? Because they really didn't know anything else. It was the only thing I'd really done other than the previous EP, which was The Rookie. And I think I always look back at that as kind of a magical time because I was able to kind of create a sound and an identity with the New Division. And then the album after that, I think I really kind of messed it up. I always joke about it, but Together We Shine, which is the follow-up album, is probably my least favorite album that I've ever done. And I think the reason why that album turned out the way it did was because I was so worried about creating something different and trying to maybe get a little bit too much outside of my comfort zone to my own detriment. And a lot of people love that second album, by the way. I'm not dissing that. I'm just saying for me personally, the reason why I think Shadows is a lot of people's favorite album as far as the New Division is probably, it's because of the fact that I kind of went into it with very little worry about what people would think about it. And I think the more and more that I continue to write music and I continue to work on records, that's kind of my approach to it, is to really try to have a bit of a carefree attitude and not really worry so much about what the reaction or what the reception is going to be upon its release. And if I look at the process that I had for that album Shadows, I was just having fun the whole time. I wasn't really frustrated with any part of the process. It was always just an exciting and fun record to work on. Whereas the second album felt like this tedious effort of me trying to prove something to myself and to other people. And I think by doing that, I think I kind of created this album that doesn't really represent who I really was at that time or who I am in general. And I feel that like Shadows is an album that really represents what I feel in terms of what I want to represent musically, what I want to represent visually, sonically, and all that kind of stuff. So Shadows is probably my favorite album that I worked on. And then third favorite, if I had to pick one, probably this last one, Hidden Memories, just because I was able to kind of go back a little bit to that sound and kind of revisit what it felt like to write an album 10 years ago and try to get back into that mindset of kind of feeling like I'm not worried about how people are going to receive this. And it's a really hard place to get to as an artist or as a person who creates anything. You know, you're always worried about if people are going to appreciate it or like it, or what songs they're going to hate, what songs are not going to, you know, enjoy as much. But it's something you have to kind of try to practice every day as much as you can. And it's a hard thing to do.
It is a hard thing to do. I mean, as an artist, like, it is very easy to get stuck in your own head, like going through
Yeah.
everything that you create and kind of like looking at it and go, okay, this sounds great. I love this. I love the way this is, but I wonder how everybody else is going to perceive this. You know, I wonder if they're going to, how they're going to take that, what they're going to interpret it like. And when you start going down that rabbit hole, like, there sometimes is no turning back on that one. When you try to go back to where you were at the beginning, when you try to go back and say, you know, I was carefree then. I didn't care. I didn't, you know, have a worry or anything like that. You know, I wasn't as established as I am today, and I just had fun with it. I just let it roll. But going back to that era of that, I think it's a freeing feeling that you have, because, you know, you're not bogged down by anything that has come after it. I think a lot more artists should practice that too, like getting back to where they were at the very beginning, where they felt free and they go, you know what, it's a blank canvas. I have nothing that came before this, and I'm just going to put out what I love, what I care about, and if people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. And it's just the way it is. It's who I am inside.
No, I 100% agree. And I think one of the reasons why back then I was able to have so much fun with it is for that very reason. And I always approached writing music out of fun, you know, and then eventually it turned into something that wasn't fun. And then it became about popularity. It became about, how do I get the best, you know, there wasn't streaming back then, I guess, but how do I get the most MySpace plays, or how do I get the most iTunes sales, or how do I compete with other artists who are having this massive success, you know? And then if you kind of go down that route, I'm sure a lot of people probably use that towards their advantage, but my personality, I'm not wired that way. I'm not wired to be the kind of person who is trying to compete with other people all the time. And so I think I always have to fall back on why I got into the music in the first place. And it was a way for me to kind of do something that wasn't, I guess it was a way for me to, I guess, kind of like vent how I was feeling at the time, but it was also something fun and exciting. And there's a feeling that you get when you're creating something and you yourself feel really happy with it. And that moment can disappear like that the minute that you share it with somebody and somebody has something where they say, like, you know, this song sucks, or they give you some kind of feedback that, you know, someone like me and my kind of personality type, I would probably take that. And sometimes it can be hard for me to get back into focus in terms of like how I felt, or how do I get back to that feeling. But I think a lot of it just has to do with kind of knowing how your personality is, and everyone's different. I'm the kind of person who I try to really keep what I'm working on really close to me, and then I only let a few people that I really trust to give me good critical feedback. And then from there, I can kind of start diving in more. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, you got to figure out why you're doing it. And for me, it was originally always because it was a fun thing to do. And I got a really good feeling out of creating something. And while I'm creating, I'm thinking like, wow, this is something that I really, really like. I really enjoy it. And then don't go into the, well, other people like it, you know, mentality. I mean, you can use that obviously, but you got to kind of be discerning as to, you know, as far as to how much you dive back into that thought process.
That right there is very true. I think you know, we do get caught in our heads a lot. We do, and we go around in this merry-go-round. But all the things that you've created and all the things that you've come out with, you can really see like your journey. You know, up and down, your highs, your lows. I mean, you can really kind of see that reflected in your music and your releases. I mean, every release that you've come out with, it doesn't all sound the same. It has like it's you know, it has its variations, and it's you can tell in certain songs that I've heard from you, like you can tell, you know what, I get what he's feeling there, I get what he's conveying. And a lot of artists, like, that's really important for everybody out there to take that in, and make sure you as artists out there, like, convey those feelings, get those out to the world. And I know also what you were mentioning too, like when you were starting this, it was all about, just the love of the music. And I think that the more you do it throughout the years, sometimes you do have a love-hate relationship with it. You do feel like, God, I love this at one point, but then all of a sudden I hate this. Like, why do I hate this? Like, why am I have this anger towards it? But
It's so true.
at the end of the day, it's get out of your head. Just get out of your head and just feel it. That's all it's about.
Amen to that.
What was the drive behind getting you into making music and performing live?
Yeah, so I guess this kind of touches on the last topic, but a bit. So my background is kind of weird. I was born in Oakland, California. Then when I was 3, my parents moved down to Uruguay in South America. And then I grew up there from 3 until I was 18. And then down there, I started when I was about 13 or 14. I was really into that era of music, like in terms of like indie rock and all that kind of stuff. So like, Interpol was coming out, the Strokes were coming out, and all these like garage bands were coming out. Like everyone had like the kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like the Hives, the Strokes. And so that was like the music that like really got me into wanting to write music. And I started my first band when I was about 13 or 14. And then I recorded 2 albums when I was down there, all in Spanish, which is really weird to think about now because I haven't thought about that in a long time. But I always had this passion for wanting to play, that music that I was writing live. And so I formed a band and we started playing shows in Uruguay. And we played a lot of shows. We did like a little mini tour throughout the country and stuff like that. And it wasn't like anything, super big, but my dad would drive us out and we would go down to these different churches because my parents were, they still are, they're missionaries down there. And so we would play at different churches and stuff like that, different events. I think we did one in Brazil also. And so I always had this drive from an early age that I wanted to perform and be a musician and write my own music. And I kind of want to have like my own identity. And I think back then, growing up, I didn't really, when you're at that age, you're trying to like figure out who you are in the world and like, what is your thing? What's your like niche that separates you from everyone else? And at that point in time, for me, it was music. That was the thing that I gravitated towards. And when I moved to California, when I was 18, I got into electronic music, which oddly enough, I used to hate when I was a teenager. I hated anything that sounded electronic. Like I remember this guy, which now that I think about it, this guy was like way ahead of my years back then, but he was the same age as I was. He was like 13 or 14. He's like, man, you got to listen to this album, dude. It's so good. I'm like, oh yeah, what is it? He's like, it's Moby. And I'm like, what? So then I played it and I was like, dude, this is terrible. It was like Moby's like Play album, which is, really popular. And I hated it back then. I was like, this is terrible. I'm never going to write music like this. And then when I turned like 18 or 19, I somehow stumbled upon his stuff. And then I was listening to Joy Division, ironically, when I was a teenager, but I had no idea who New Order was. And then I later put 2 and 2 together when I was like 18 or 19, that New Order was actually Joy Division, but then obviously Ian Curtis died and stuff like that. And then they formed New Order. And that like just totally blew my mind that this was the same band doing guitar music. And now they're doing this completely different style of music that I was, predisposed to think was super cheesy and corny. And then the more I listened to it, the more I fell in love with it. And I started listening to a lot of other bands like OMD, Depeche Mode, Tears for Fears, and I got really into the new wave thing, the 80s new wave thing. And then I got into like Italo disco, and then I got into like trance and house and techno. And yeah, so I was just always fascinated by synthesizers from that point on. And I just wanted to create this project of my own that featured that kind of music. And I think the large part of the reason why I made electronic music was because it was so expensive to record anywhere in California as far as like guitar-based music. And I was like, well, what's the next thing I can do if I can't record guitars and go into a studio? I was like, well, I could buy a synthesizer. So I could basically buy a synthesizer for the same price as like a recording session. So that's what I did. I went and bought like an Alesis Micron, and I made like 6 or 7 songs just using the Alesis. Like I made the drums on it, I made the pads, the bass, And I had like, I didn't even have like a proper recording program. I was using Nuendo, which was basically a 5.1 version of Cubase. So Nuendo is really meant for post-production. It's meant for people that are doing film and video. So I was making all these songs in 5.1. I was like, this stuff sounds really weird. Like everything's panned all differently and it just doesn't sound right. But I'm like, whatever, you know, I'm just gonna keep going with it. And then eventually somebody was like, yeah, dude, you're using you're not like recording in stereo, you're recording for like TV and film. And I was like, oh. And then I downloaded FL Studio, and then I learned that whole world. And that's when I really started to get serious with learning how to produce music outside of just like, you know, programming everything on a synthesizer, but actually working in like in a DAW. And yeah, so that's pretty much it, really. I mean, that's kind of what got me started on wanting to record and do all that kind of stuff.
And isn't it funny how you go about that journey? Like, I know for myself, you know, I did start the sort of the kind of the same way you had started a little bit, you know, where you were started with the rock music, you know what I mean? Like in high school for me, it was like playing in a goth, you know, like a goth, like Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie kind of band. And it was like, you know, like metal and like, you know, hard, like spooky shit. Like that was the stuff that I was like really into at that time. So, but as I transitioned out of that, you know, you start going into electronic music and you kind of go like, you know what? Like, I feel like I can really convey a lot, you know, and say a lot of things that I want to say on my own terms, going down this road. And it was a lot easier to do than having to get everybody together in a studio, having to like pay to get everything mixed, because being in that other kind of band, like, you know, you're in there for, God, it's like you're spending an entire day in there, like, you know, sometimes 8 to 10 hours, like working on an album. And you kind of go, okay, well, that's it for today. We got to come back tomorrow and do the same thing, you know. And you kind of go like, okay, well, I'm ready. I'm all about it. But when you do electronic music, like you have that little personal area inside of your home, inside of where you live, and you can kind of just create as you go. And just to kind of release it whenever you feel like you want to release it, because you have that accessibility right there. A lot of artists who are operating today do a lot of that. Like you have your own home recording studio, and it's great to see like how far we've come in the past 20 years as far as music production has gone. Because now something you had to do 20 years ago in a recording studio, you can do from your home like that. But there again, there is something special about going into a recording studio. There will always be that special feeling that it never goes away. And it's always a real treat when you get to go into a recording studio. But it's just so funny to see how that kind of stuff has changed over the years, isn't it?
I think it's really interesting because nowadays the whole bedroom producer thing is it's like its own genre, right? And I didn't even know that was what I was doing. I was just like, you know, I just listened to electronic music or synthesizers or whatever, and this opened a whole new world for me. And I was like, I don't see why I can't just do this at home. They sound really great. I don't, you know, like the cool thing about synthesizers is that you don't really need high-end gear to record it to make it sound good. And once you start dabbling with things like Ableton or FL Studio, you realize that a lot of these programs come with software synthesizers that sound really, really good. And so you can really get away with something sounding, I mean, to the average person, a lot of people can't really tell the difference between, you know, a synthesizer recorded in Abbey Road Studios versus your own room, you know? And so you could really get away with stuff like that. And I was like, this is awesome. I can make music that seems somewhat believable. And surely enough, after I started kind of posting a lot of demos and stuff like that on MySpace, people were like, yeah, this is cool, man. I really like this stuff a lot. And I was like, okay, I guess there might be like an audience for this. Maybe I should take this a little more seriously and maybe get like a better laptop or something, you know? And yeah, it's crazy to think that I basically probably don't do guitar music now because it was too expensive, and now I just do, basically synthesizer-based music. It's a weird thing to think about.
And look at where that journey has taken you. I mean, the new division is everywhere. You were everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the people that I know have heard of the new division. It's just amazing to see where you've gone and where you are today. What are you looking forward to accomplishing the most moving forward?
It's hard to say. Like, I've never been a long-term planner, and it's probably to my detriment, to be honest, because I really wish I had the mentality to think 5 years into the future and say, this is where I want to see myself. And I think I've missed a lot of opportunities probably because of that. But at the same time, I also don't want to take anything so seriously to the point where if I don't make that goal, it's somehow like a failure to me or anything like that. So I really kind of, with New Division, I really kind of live with it one day at a time. I'm not really having these great big benchmarks of saying, I want to open for this major artist, or I want to play at that festival in the next couple of years. I really kind of don't really care about that stuff too much. And I think it's definitely maybe been not the best way to approach it, but I just don't have the drive to have these really big goals. I just really love making the music. I really love just focusing on a new album that I'm working on. And I hope that when the album comes out, that's when I start kind of planning and I start really trying to figure out, okay, who do we need to hit up to get the word out on this? What are the outlets that are probably going to be most receptive to this new record? So as far as that's concerned, that's kind of how that goes. But I guess if I have like a vision of myself in the future of what I want to achieve, I mean, I would love to be a go-to for artists and for bands that need somebody to come in and like be a producer for them. But the problem is nowadays, so many people are kind of doing it themselves. There's really not a whole lot of need for those kind of like, not that I'm Quincy Jones, but like those kinds of people that come in and kind of reshape and completely transform an album from what the artist had vision wise to where it ended up. And I think that that was kind of my goal originally, was like, I really wanted to become a producer so that I could work on other people's records. But the more that I kind of started dabbling and working on other people's stuff, I kind of started to realize that that wasn't really my strength, and it wasn't really something I enjoyed all that much. So it was kind of like, well, why am I even doing this if this isn't something I really enjoy doing? I really am a lot more comfortable just kind of being in my own studio, working on songs, releasing them, and not really having to meet other people's expectations, because I already do that in so many other areas of my life. But this is the one area of my life where I just want to be able to kind of not have to do that in. And I feel that with the new division, it's just kind of like my little baby, and I can kind of mold it and shape it however I want. And but if I had to answer that in a different way, I guess, what would any band want? What would any artist want? I mean, all of us, I think, are striving towards the same things, which is to have success, and however that's measured is different for everyone. But I've already felt that I've achieved success a long time ago. When the first couple of songs I put out and people were enjoying and purchasing and buying them, like that to me was kind of like, well, okay, where do I go from here? Just keep on making good music. I don't really know what else to do. Like, there isn't really like a benchmark that I'm striving towards. There isn't like a venue or a show that is going to change what I've already experienced. I've already experienced everything that I thought was going to be amazing, so anything from here to me is success. Every show that we've played from the first one to the next one has just been incrementally better and better. Sure, we're not like probably playing festivals and we're not touring constantly, but it's not really something that I look at and say, wow, like I really need to work on that and get like more festival placements, or wow, we need to do a lot more tour dates, or wow, we need to like get way more Spotify streams or way more album sales. I'm just happy with where I'm at. And I think that if I just continue to do that, things will constantly grow. And I'm not in a place where I feel that we need to get to this stardom level and we're somehow known by every single person in the world. Like, that's just not something I'm really that interested in. I just really enjoy the process of it. I kind of enjoy keeping a bit of a low profile, which is probably why I'm not like constantly posting on my Instagram, and people are probably like, hey, how come you never talk about what you're doing every day in the studio. And it's like, I'm just not that kind of a person. I just don't have that much of like, I mean, the music is about as much as I can really share and feel good about it. Everything else, I'm just kind of like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like, I guess I could do like a Twitch one day, which actually I was thinking about. I should do like a Twitch stream and kind of show people like my process of like working on a song, and maybe that'll inspire somebody else to kind of develop a workflow or something. But yeah, all the stuff that goes along with like promotional stuff, like all that, I just hate doing it. Like I hate making music videos, and God bless Brad because he's always pushing me to make better videos. But all that kind of stuff, to me, is just so hard to do. It's just not where I naturally go. And so, yeah, in the future, I don't know. I think I just look forward to making a lot more records. I mean, that's one thing I do hope. I hope I have like 20 records or something like that by the time I hit 50. And they're all really good. And they're better and better each time. That's about as much as I can hope for.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I think that you will have those 20 records, and I think each and every one of them will be amazing and awesome. And you will see a lot of that hard work in each and every one of them, because they're so personal, and they're so you. I know, as you were mentioning earlier about doing a Twitch and showing your process, I think that would be really great. People get to see like how you go about doing your day-to-day routine in the studio, getting to see those little nuances and tips and tricks that you have, and sharing that with the world. I think that would be amazing. The things that you consider successful, are not necessarily going to be the same things that other people find successful. They're always going to be different. It's like your success is different from my success, and my success is different from your success, different from the person next door to you, and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of the time, artists and people who create, like they get wrapped up in that, and they go, you know what? Like I'm not successful unless I'm doing this, unless I'm doing this thing. This is what I need to do to be successful. And it's like, at the end of the day, no. The thing that you're going to need to do to be successful is to accept the fact that you can be successful in the things that you are doing, and to accept that what you are doing is a success already.
I like that a lot. And I think it's interesting too, because we live in a culture right now where so much of what we do is valued by numbers and by statistics. And I have a lot of friends that have kind of dwindled down on their creative output just because they felt that something wasn't received as much, or it didn't get as many plays as they expected. And I'm just like, so what, man? Like, keep doing it, keep putting out more music, keep putting out more records. Like, you don't know where that stuff is going to be in 5 years. You don't know where things are going to who it's going to influence 20 years from now. Somebody could stumble upon that in 30 years when they're like 13 and hear your record, and all of a sudden now they're just completely, just blown away by what you did. Like a lot of times when you're creating something too, it's important to know that like it might not be right for that time, but it doesn't mean that it won't last. And I think that's a really important thing to remember for anyone who's creating, because I think, being relevant only really works within that time frame. Once you're irrelevant, then where does your music stand? And that's something that I think a lot of people need to think about whenever they're making like, to not feel scared to create something that may not fit with whatever the trends are or whatever is popular at that minute. I mean, if you want to make music like that, like, more power to you. There's nothing wrong with that, but you should never be afraid to make something that isn't relevant at that point in time, just because you're afraid to release it. Like, you should have no fear in that sense.
Well, at the center of all of it, being an artist is about breaking the mold, thinking outside the box, and showcasing something that a lot of people may not really understand at the time, but eventually may come around to. So more power to you. Everybody out there, more power to you. If you're an artist, create, build something, showcase something that you love, and don't care. Don't care if everybody out there doesn't like it. Just put it out there. And you know what? Maybe people years from now will be looking back at that and go, you know what? I found this. I discovered this. This is amazing. This is the greatest thing I've ever heard.
I actually have a funny thing that I do whenever I'm looking for new music now is I actually try to find the artists with the least amount of plays and followers, and I dive into their catalog. And sometimes I'm like, wait, what? Like, how does nobody know about this? And then I'll share it with like a few friends. Have you guys heard of this? No. They're like, damn, this is pretty good. And they're like, who is this? I'm like, I don't know. I just found them randomly. And I've been doing that more and more because, you know, you can always find what's popular now with a simple search, but it's a lot harder to find things that isn't that popular. And you'll be surprised by how much good music is out there. And then you can kind of feel like, oh, wow, I found this little special gem of mine and I'm going to share it with all my friends and be the one who, you know, introduce them to this new band or artist. And it's a really fun thing to do. I really enjoy doing it. I create like playlists and then I try to highlight those artists with the New Division playlist that I have, which has like a decent amount of followers. And I get emails from people saying like, yo, like I've never heard of this band before. Like they're really good. How'd you find them? I was like, Spotify crate digging, you know, just trying to find those artists who don't have a voice yet, or at least don't have a really good publicist or something. I don't know.
Well, you know what? Everybody out there, take these words right here from John. Find artists that maybe don't have any followers or anybody like paying attention to their music, and listen to their music. Shine a light on them. Bring them to the forefront. It's important for everybody to discover and dive into that world of sound and go into those places where necessarily not a lot of people would go. What positive message would you give your fans out there?
Well, I think right now, obviously, these are really hard times for everyone, you know, with COVID and all that kind of stuff. And I was really thinking about it. I mean, I think mental health right now is a really big thing. And I think in a way, there's a lot of people that are struggling with depression, anxiety, and uncertainty with regards to their jobs, with their family, health, whatever it is. And while all this stuff is going on, we're also kind of living in this unprecedented time where people are a lot more attached to their phones and computers in a good sense, meaning that if you were to call up a friend right now that you haven't talked to in like 5 or 4 years, they're likely to pick up because they're probably not working, or if they are working, they want to talk to somebody to kind of vent their frustrations or their anxiety or whatever. So, I mean, I just encourage anyone who does struggle with that kind of stuff to just to reach out to their friends and family. And if they don't have people that they feel they can talk to, you know, there's a lot of different groups and health organizations that can help people out during these times. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, everyone's kind of in isolation right now for the most part. And I think, you know, trying to stay healthy, like, don't drink every night. Don't like, don't like, you know, go crazy with whatever you enjoy doing on the side. Like, you know, this is a time where you can kind of restart yourself in your life, and you can kind of decide to use this time. It's like, it's kind of like a reset button. It's kind of how I see it. You know, like COVID has kind of like resetted life. And a lot of times when you're in the certain rhythm of life, you forget to take a break and kind of reflect on where you're at. And you forget to see, you know, where things are at. And, you know, this is like a great time to make goals. And I'm also saying this for myself too, because everyone struggles with something. And whatever that looks like, I think right now is a good time to reach out to friends and family. And it's also a great time just to kind of self-evaluate and kind of see what are some areas in your life that you feel you want to get better at. You know, I mean, whether it's being a better musician, better artist, a better parent, a better husband, or a better friend to other people. This is the time now, like, take advantage of that, because once all this goes back to normal again, you're going to miss out on the opportunity. You're going to wish that you had taken this time to really kind of like use that as a catalyst to you know, better yourself and those around you.
It's very wise words right there, everybody, from John Kunkel. You know, it's like, use this time right now. Use this time to explore your creativity. Use this time to create. Use this time to do something that you wouldn't have normally done because you didn't have enough time to do it. I think that that is so important right now, and it's really good for mental health, and it's really good for your physical health too. You know, it's like I know we can spend a lot of time on our phones, like constantly, like watching all the news updates or spending a lot of time streaming shows and just kind of getting like stuck. I like to kind of think of it like being a vampire. You know what I mean? Everything is like on, you
Yeah.
know, you're going through life and it's like um, you're stuck in suspended animation, but you're still going through life. You know what I mean? So get up, get moving, work on something, create something, tinker away, build something amazing. Because when things get back to normal, which they will sooner rather than later, you don't want to have that time where you kind of go, God, I wasted all that time. I wasted
Yeah.
all that free time that I was given. And even though it's terrible what's happening to our planet right now, it's terrible like everything that is occurring. And I know a lot of people like myself who are essential workers. We do have to still go out into the world, and we still have to do that. Um, Even though we still have to do that, we are still getting some time because you know we don't have to go to shows. We don't have to like you know like even though the entertainment business is suffering right now, it's like we don't have that FOMO right now. You know, FOMO, the fear of missing out. Like we're not missing out on anything after our days are
Yeah.
done. You know what I mean? The only thing that we're missing out on is making our dreams come true. That's the only thing that we're missing out on, like creating something and building something. And what I like to say is dream it, build it, and let it grow. And that's more important right now than anything else, I think.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree. I think this is even though it's a really, really bad time for a lot of people, there is that side of it that is positive, that, you know, to not focus on the negative side of it, but really try to focus on the positive end, which is really about more people being able to come together. And I mean, I've been on so many Zoom calls and chats with people that I haven't talked to in years, people that I haven't ever really done a Zoom call with. Everyone's kind of reconnecting right now. And I think there's something special to that. Albeit, you know, these are dire times, but I think that's a really cool and positive thing that people can probably look forward to, is being able to get on that next call with someone that you haven't talked to in years and you just want to catch up and see how they're doing.
Yes, right there. It's a great time because we have technology. We're still able to stay connected. We're still able to still see what people are doing. We get a view into their lives and we get to see how creative they still are being. So everybody out there, stay creative and connect with people and check in on people because that's what's important right now. Well, thank you so much, John, for sitting down and letting me interview today. Thank you to everybody who tuned in to watch us have this conversation. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the Fiend YouTube page as we have more great interviews on the way. And everybody out there, be sure to check out the New Division. If you haven't checked out the New Division, get into the New Division, listen to all his amazing albums, all the things he's put out, and listen to them in their entirety because they are a great journey to go on. So from Jak Syn to everybody out there, thank you again. I look forward to seeing you in person soon, John.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.